Hey, I'm Sarah, and this is the Goddess in Training podcast. This isn't about being perfect or polished or having it all figured out. This is about what happens when you actually start listening to your body, your intuition, your patterns, your truth. I'm asking big questions and having real conversations, sometimes messy and sometimes magical, with people who've lived through it, grown through it, and still don't have all the answers. If you've ever doubted yourself, betrayed your gut, or wondered if you're the only one, you're not. Let's talk about it. Welcome back to Goddess in Training. I'm your host, Sarah, and today I am so honored to be in conversation with a woman whose writing and wisdom have deeply impacted me, Claire Yaseed. Claire is a womb wisdom keeper, writer, and guide whose journey has taken her from the jungles of Colombia, where she apprenticed with Indigenous elders, to the dance floors of New York, to the path of midwifery and womb sovereignty. Her work weaves together plant medicine, ancestral healing, natural fertility awareness, and the deep intelligence of our cycles. Through her Substack, podcast, and teachings, Claire shares what it means to reconnect with our bodies, our intuition, and the ancestral knowledge that was nearly lost to us. She speaks about womb-to-tomb care, the sacred balance of masculine and feminine, and the medicine of remembering who we are. In our conversation, we explore her own healing journey, the role of ceremony and plant allies, and how reclaiming our cycles is an act of sovereignty. And we talk about her upcoming natural birth control series, a 3-part offering that reintroduces us to the wisdom of our bodies, fertility awareness, and herbal allies for conscious contraception. I know you're going to come away from this episode with so many insights and invitations to reflect on your own relationship with your body and your cycles. So let's dive in. Hi, welcome back to another episode of Goddess in Training. I'm Sarah, happy to be joined here by Claire Yaseed. I ran across Claire's writing on Substack right after I joined, and I have learned so much from Claire. Claire writes about womb wisdom and our cycles, in addition to her own journeys with plant medicine. And more recently, I've learned so much about masculinity and femininity in ways that I had never thought about it before. And so, Claire, I am so excited to have this conversation with you. And thank you so much for everything that you're putting out there on Substack. It's just been really transformative to me.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Sarah. It's really a joy and a pleasure to be here. And thank you so much for your support with my Substack and my writing. It's definitely been a beautiful part of my artistic process, translating a lot of information that I have been cultivating and co-weaving and sitting in ceremony with for years. And I'm just so happy that it's making its way out into the world and touching people. So thank you so much.
Talk a little bit about how you got to where you are right now. What has driven you to this point to talk about these topics with such passion? And you have such a wealth of information. It's like you're a professor on these things. So talk little bit about how you got to where you are right now.
Yeah, my path has been very long and winding. If I could just give like a brief overview of things, I come from a family of doctors on both sides of my family tree, doctors and healers, from the more Western allopathic model within the past couple of generations, but definitely a lot of folk healers in my lineage more further back. And growing up, I had a lot of health issues. I was very medicalized from a very young age. I would say, starting at birth, being born within the hospital system, all of the interventions that occurred during my mother's pregnancy and the birth. And then throughout my whole childhood, having a lot of illnesses and a lot of health symptoms that just brought me in and out of doctor's offices, many medications, being hospitalized on multiple occasions. I almost died when I was 13 years old. And so my relationship to my body in terms of like health and medicine was very colored with that lens for a long time. And I would say some big shifts that occurred for me throughout my life was that when I was 16 to age 20, so around 4.5 years, I was on the hormonal birth control pill, and a lot was going on for me at that time. I was dealing with pretty severe eating disorders. I was dealing with a lot of unconscious and unresolved and unhealed sexual trauma. I was in a very unhealthy relationship at the time. And when I was 20, I was still on the pill, but I was 20 years old, and I had this very intense spiritual awakening that occurred in the middle of a university class during my last year of college. And it was this man who was like drumming and chanting, and I went into a full trance for like 15 minutes and had my first, I guess I would say, visions that I ever received. And in those visions, a lot of things occurred, but the biggest thing was that I was in a jungle. And I had never been to a jungle in my life, but I could feel myself in a jungle, and it felt like home for the first time. And after I had that vision at 20, my entire life changed very drastically. Within 2 months, I ended up getting off of the hormonal birth control pills. I came deeply into my intuition and my sense of connection to ancestry and spirit and the land, most importantly. Like, I literally remember going into a dance class after that, because I was also a dancer. I'm still a dancer, but I was on like a professional dancer track for a long phase of my life. And so I remember just feeling like, wow, oh my God, my body dancing feels different. Something feels different. I want to be on the land. I want to feel my bare feet on the earth. And I was living in New York City at this time. And so that was very difficult and pretty incongruent. But I just kept feeling like I need to be with nature. That's all I want right now in my life. And I also want to figure out how I was able to time travel to these altered states of consciousness just through drumming. Like, that was really, really intense and profound for me. And so my path continued on for about 4 years after that. And it was a very lonely time, a really, really hard time in my life, being in New York City, struggling again with a lot of substance abuse, a lot of very, very distorted relationships around sexuality, a lot of re-victimization with many men, just being very lost. I had a pretty bad relationship with my family at that point in time as well. And so things were just pretty bleak for many years. And then when I was 24, I found my way to the Colombian jungle and was initiated into a ceremonial way of life with the medicine of Yahe, which is the Colombian brew of ayahuasca. And when I took my very first cup of medicine, when I felt the medicine on my lips and on my tongue, I said to myself, wow, I'm going to drink this medicine for the rest of my life. And from that moment, my path just like fell apart, came back together again, fell apart, came back together again. I went back to the States. Things were really hard. I went back to Colombia 6 months later, kept drinking medicine, and it became very clear that that was the path that I needed to follow. So at 25, I pretty much packed up my entire life into a storage unit in New York City. I closed my chapter as a professional dancer. I packed up a big backpack on my back, and I bought a one-way ticket back down to South America. And within about 2 months of that journey, I met my late teachers, Abuelo Querubín and Abuela Maria. So Abuelo Querubín Queta Alvarado was the leader of the Cofán people of Colombia and Ecuador. He died at 110 years old, so he was very, very old. He was also the spiritual authority of Yahe medicine, so ayahuasca medicine in Colombia. And I learned under them for 2 years in total, a year and a half of which I was living full time in the jungle with them in Indigenous territory. I was pretty much the only northerner, the only person with this color skin, not just in the village, but like in the entire region of Bajo Putumayo, Colombia. And during that time, a lot happened. There's like so much that I could say about it. It's kind of the basis of what my own podcast is based off of, the foundation of what I share in my writing and on my podcast and with my work in general. A lot of that comes from my own experience of healing very, very deep illness within my womb. In particular, I struggled with urinary tract infections, chronic yeast infections, bacterial vaginosis, pelvic inflammatory disease, the last of which I struggled with for 9 whole months. And no doctor, no Western doctor, no herbalist, no naturopath, no acupuncturist, like no one could tell me what was going on. And what finally helped me heal was that I got back to Colombia. I drank a cup of ayahuasca, and I was able to see inside my body what was going on. And I found my way to a really wonderful gynecologist outside of Bogota in Colombia. She was able to show me that I had pelvic abscesses. She put me on antibiotics. That cleared that infection, the physical part of the infection. And then afterwards, for a full year and a half, I was in the jungle resolving very, very deep and intense and horrendous experiences of a lot of sexual violence throughout my life for essentially 2 decades of a lot of sexual violence, distortion, re-victimization, and just pain that I was holding in my womb, not just from my own lived experience of 20 years of that kind of violence, but like 7 generations of my family. And so I was just clearing immense, immense trauma and pain from my bloodline, which was not easy. It was very lonely. It was very scary. I was incredibly supported and resourced by my elders, Abuelo Querubín and Abuela Maria. They really took care of me as their daughter. And yeah, just oriented me with such care and love and respect for my process. And the plants helped me heal. And during that time, I really just understood, wow, okay, like everything that I have ever suffered with, particularly when it came to my reproductive health, particularly when it came to my relationship with sexuality, my relationship with men, and also just all the blocks that I had around my fertility, around my ability to envision myself as a mother in the future, around my ability to envision myself in a healthy relationship. All of that was just like blown open and in a deep, deep process of apprenticeship, I would say, with like the medicine of womanhood. And so I left the jungle back in November of last year. I've been in the States doing a lot of deep, beautiful repair work with my family. I made a deep commitment to get into my path with birth work. And so I'm in multiple trainings at this moment in time, hopefully stepping into a midwifery apprenticeship at some point in the future when I get back down to South America. So I'm in a transition phase right now, but essentially everything that I speak on, everything that I share about in my writing, in my podcast, in my art is essentially a synthesization of both my own lived experience of being a Westerner in this world, coming from the United States, coming from the family that I come from as a daughter of Mother Europe, a displaced European descendant, who then had the immense privilege to learn under these incredible elders who, yeah, brought me in as a daughter. You know, I get emotional talking about them every time because the impact that they had on my life is, I can't even put words to it. I try. I try, but their presence is really what orients my path of service in this life, particularly my path of service with the realm of womb wisdom keeping. So that's the long story short.
Wow, wow. Gosh, the thing that stands out to me though is, it's so beautiful that you feel their presence and you feel such gratitude for them. But at the same time, what an immense amount of trust and bravery you must have had to be in that situation and to stay there and persevere through what must have been painful levels of discomfort that most people can't even really imagine. I've been in the jungle, I've done plant medicine, and putting that all together and being immersed in that for so long, I can get a little bit of a taste of with my own experience, but I know that it must have been so incredibly difficult at every level. Talk a little bit more about the challenge of it and how you feel now on the other side of it. I cannot imagine just what really over a short period of time, you're talking about 2 years of your life to have such immense transformation.
Yeah. I, it was more, I would say, like a full decade
Yeah.
of a lot of unraveling. I would say the most intense portion of it happened in the 2 years that I knew my teacher. I would also say that things started transforming deeply at age 20 because the chanting that the man had been doing in that university class that sent me into my first vision was he was chanting Icaros, which are the sounds of the jungle.
Wow.
And so when I connect the dots, and I didn't realize this until years later, but when I connect the dots, I can recognize that the plants of the jungle were actually working with me, and the ancestral spirits of the jungle were working with me long before I ever sat in ceremony at 24. And so there's like that part of my journey where I can feel that the plant was orienting my life and guiding me through the experiences that I needed to go through in order to be able to cultivate the medicine that I now walk with, a lot of which was a lot of suffering. My teacher, Abuelo Querubín, said the reason that I am the healer that I am and the leader that I am, not just the spiritual leader, but the political leader that I am, is because I have suffered immensely in this life. And I feel that very similarly with where I am on the other side now, where I feel really good in my body. I feel really good in relationship to my health. I feel really, really good in relationship to my womb and my menstrual cycle. I feel so much more peace around my relationship with sexuality. I feel a lot more safety in my relationship with men because I suffered so much. Because I went through so much suffering and I was really deep in the shit and in the dark and in the depths of just the underworld for a very, very long time. And so it's not a very linear path of just like 2 years of transformation. I guess I've been walking with the medicine of ayahuasca for about 4.5 years now, walking with other plant medicines since I was like 18. So it's like over a decade of kind of journeying in altered states of consciousness. And I would also say the integration of everything has been deeply important in the almost year that I've been out of the jungle now. That's been the hardest part of this path, actually, has been not being in ceremony. But when it comes to the challenges and the difficulties, when we're speaking about being a guest within an Indigenous culture, I was really immensely lucky that I found elders who were very clear that these medicines and these traditions and these healing modalities are for everyone. Doesn't matter your race, does not matter your ethnicity, your age, your religious affiliation, what country you come from. None of that mattered to my teachers. That is not necessarily the case with all Indigenous people. So I really only speak from my experience with them, but they always made me feel completely welcome and safe and protected and cared for in the territory and in their home and in their ceremonies. And so with that container of safety and care that I had from them, that is what allowed me to go into the depths of profound intergenerational trauma. And it was really, really, really fucking hard. I really can't emphasize enough how challenging it was physically on the body to be drinking medicine 3 to 5 times a week, every single week, puking my guts out on the jungle floor, like screaming, crying, really, really like begging to die many times, and knowing that I had to keep going because there was so much violence that needed to be cleared from my cells, from my bones, from my blood. I was traveling through many different experiences that I had in my life, particularly the experiences of sexual violence, where I had to go back in time, see what happened to me, felt what happened to me, and watch different parts of my soul essentially fracture off and get stuck in that timeline. And so I had to just keep going back in time and keep collecting those parts of me and saying like, yes, that happened. That should have never happened to you, especially as a child. That was fucking horrible. And also your adult self is here to bring you back. And so I did that with my own experience. I did that with many members of my family who experienced sexual abuse throughout their lives in childhood, in adulthood. I just kept praying. And as I continued to clear and heal all of this violence and distortion from my bloodline, my creativity came back online. My art really transformed. I was just like drawing and painting and beading and weaving and singing and dancing all day, every day. I was just in this deep ceremony of creativity finally. And all of my issues with my womb and my menstrual cycle and really painful cycles, a lot of infections, just like chronic dis-ease within my female body, that all settled slowly but surely as I kept doing this work. And so it also helped me understand that, like, yes, there are many modalities that can support with women's reproductive health, right? There's herbs that you can work with. There's vaginal steams and sitz baths. There are homeopathic remedies that are incredible. There's meditation practices. There's embodiment practices. There's movement. All of that kind of stuff is really supportive. And at the end of the day, if we don't get to like the root cause of something, which for me was all of the sexual violence that I had been experiencing throughout 2 full decades, I wasn't able to fully clear all of it until I did that work. And so while it was horrendously challenging, like truly, the most difficult years of my life, I just knew that when I get on the other side of this, I'm going to be at peace. And I would say in my life at this point, now I'm on the other side, 95% of the time, I'm really at peace. Things can happen. There might be stressors, stuff going on in my external world, but internally, I feel so much more resourced and trusting and in alignment with what my path of service is meant to be in this life. And so I just keep going. And that's kind of where I'm at these days.
Curious to hear what you have to say about choice and free will. I've had similar experiences like the drumming that you experienced in college, where it just put me on a path. And it sounds like you were put on this path, and that perhaps my experience was that it didn't feel like a choice. It felt like I need to do these things. And I mean, I could turn my back to them and make a different choice, but that would have been more challenging than to step into whatever it was that I was being called to do. Do you see a connection between choice, our spiritual paths, and the womb? How do you connect those things?
Yeah, I love that question. The first thing that comes up was something that one of my teachers speaks about a lot, Rochelle Saliga from Innate Traditions. I'm currently in her innate postpartum practitioner care training. And something that she says, which is 100% true, is that there's like a cosmic joke of free will. That is like there are the laws of nature, which is what my elders spoke to. Abuelo Querubín spoke to a lot. The laws of nature, or he also referred to it as Indigenous law, which is not indigenous to like one specific territory or bloodline or lineage, but just like indigenous to the earth and like the original instructions of the Creator, which is this is how to live in right alignment, in right relationship with your ancestors, with your descendants, with the elemental teachers of the earth, with all of the guardian spirits that we walk amongst, with all of the angels and guides and ascended masters and teachers and intergalactic beings. Like there is a cosmic order to things. And so what my teacher Rochelle says is like the cosmic joke of free will is that you can choose to either be in alignment with that or to not be in alignment with that. And that's your choice. But the consequences are often, they show up in your physical health, they show up in your emotional health, they show up in your relationships, they show up in the way that the earth is expressing that lack of alignment. They show up in fires and droughts and famines and, all of the things that we are experiencing right now as little crazy human beings trying to figure out this weird thing called life. And so that's like the first thing that I'll touch on is free will, of course, is a choice. And at the end of the day, when we utilize our free will to act against the laws of nature, there is going to be consequences of that. And so I see the whole first part of my life as really fighting against my destiny, really fighting against what I knew I came onto this earth to do, which was, at 15 years old, I read this book called The Red Tent, which is an incredible book by Anita Diamond. Changed my life. It's probably my favorite book. I've read it like hundreds of times. And very early on, as soon as they were talking about being in births and being a midwife, I was like, oh, that's me. That's totally me. That's what I'm meant to do, is to be accompanying women's role of matrescence, but the rite of passage of birth and the ceremony of birth. And then I Googled, like how to become a midwife. And it was a very medicalized version of it. And I was like, I'm not doing that. That's not my path. And so it feels like for over a decade, I was like fighting my destiny of getting into women's reproductive care. And I was doing like everything that you could possibly do to avoid that. And I was really in a place of a lot of like ego and wanting to just be a like famous artist and professional dancer and all of the other crazy shit that I did in my life that taught me a lot of really valuable lessons, all of which eventually, when I was forced to come back to the States and had to get really real moving into my Saturn return, which I'm in right now, it became super clear, like, okay, birth work and women's reproductive health and women's health in general is what I've always came to this earth to do. And so with that, it's like choice and free will and destiny and what my path decided to bring me to in this lifetime, what I chose to birth myself into. It's really been a reckoning of just kind of like, okay, with everything that you've experienced, with all of the distortion, with all of the confusion, with all of the mixed signals and wonkiness of fighting against my destiny. Like the choice actually is, am I going to walk in right alignment with the laws of nature and with the path that I chose? Or am I going to continue running from it? And how is that going to continue to damage me, my relationships, my health, my overall well-being, and my path of service? Like it's really that for me, I think. And yes, we can speak about like the intuition part of it, of like knowing what you know. Like in my heart, I always knew this was my path. And sometimes you fight your intuition. Sometimes you know what you need to do and you can't do it. Your human self doesn't want to sacrifice. It doesn't want to give up its ego. It doesn't want to be humble. It doesn't want to be a student again. It doesn't want to admit that it doesn't know a lot of things and that it needs to find teachers, that it needs to invest in its education, that it needs to like really commit to something. And so there's that part of the intuition of just kind of being like, I know what I know. And also I don't want to know that. And like you're fighting. But I do feel that I'm at a point now where I'm kind of like, okay, I know that when I don't listen to my intuition, everything falls apart. And when I do listen to my intuition, even if it's really scary, even if I'm absolutely terrified, even if I don't feel ready, even if I don't feel like I'm deserving, I just have to do it. Because in that way, I stay on a straight path. And that's the most important thing.
Yeah, that's been my experience too. And I also love the book, The Red Tent, and have read it over and over and over again. Um, and have had similar callings to when I was having my own children. I worked with midwives and doulas. I was like, oh, I think this is what I want to do with my life. And then when I was out of that stage, I kind of realized that that wasn't what my long term path is. And I've kind of had these kinds of flows where like super into something when I'm in that period of my life. But I think that that's where I'm supposed to be in every moment, actually. But I'm super interested in what you have to say about how the masculine and the feminine interplay in this world currently and how that could be improved upon. I just have learned so much from your series on this on Substack and learned so much about the ways in which we've been programmed. And there are there are things that I think that I say now that 10 years ago, the version of me would be like, why are you saying that? You're a feminist, like how can you possibly be speaking in these terms of a woman's or the feminine true nature and the masculine true nature? We've had so much programming that makes us really resistant to understanding our true nature. And I just love the way that you've leaned into this in a way that is really easy, at least was easy for me to digest and was really, really resonated. How did you get into that path in talking about the divine masculine, the divine feminine, and our true nature as human beings?
Yeah, I got into it through a lot of distortion. Let me think on how to translate it. So I struggled a lot with my gender up until I was about 26 or 27. And I was living in New York City for about 8.5 years. I was very immersed in kind of the art world, which has a lot of people who are experimenting with gender and sexuality and expressions of who they want to be, which I think is a beautiful thing for people to play and figure out what works for them. And I know that for myself, I leaned very heavily into a like non-binary slash gender fluid slash like trans expression of who I thought my soul was, predominantly because that was the only world that I was in. And when I spoke about feeling unsafe in my body or uncomfortable in my body, or like I just don't feel like a woman, the only feedback that I was receiving from the bubble that I was in was like, oh, well, then you must just be like a different gender. You must just not be a woman. And so I really latched onto that identity for a really long time. For probably 7 years, I was like very adamant about like, I am not a woman. Do not call me a woman. Do not see me as a woman. Do not have sex with me as a woman. Like, don't be in a relationship with me as a woman. It was really, really intense and painful for me. And I had been told that that was like gender dysphoria. That was like the term that was put onto my experience, gender dysphoria. And what shifted for me was when I was living in the jungle, I was also living in a place where intact understandings of male and female roles were still very at play. And initially, my own Western feminist lens, because I was very also attached to like a feminist identity for a long time, was looking at these and being like, wow, these women are so oppressed. This is so horrible. It's so patriarchal, blah, blah, blah. Mostly because I was just seeing the male shamans and how they would show up in ceremony. And I felt that the women were not being heard or seen or respected from my own perspective. And the more and more time that I spent there, the more I realized how deep the respect for women actually went, how deep the respect for their role as mothers more than anything went, and as grandmothers, how they were the ones who really were orienting the families and how the men were listening to them and applying that information in a more external way that the world could see. I was seeing the ways in which every single woman in that village was a medicine woman in her own right, that her own female physiology was what was informing her intuition, her wisdom, her knowledge, her work with the plants. I was watching women who were planting all of the food for their families, who were harvesting all of the herbs for their families when they got sick. I watched the invisible labor of medicine women all day long. And it took me many, 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 many months to recognize the value of that, because in the family that I had grown up in and just in the culture that I had grown up in, very like liberal feminist bubble, I was not taught to value and recognize that aspect of medicine womanhood, essentially. And so in that respect, I also learned how to really mother myself as well. My time in the jungle, I was cooking for myself every single meal. I was really nurturing myself, mothering myself in a way that I felt like I had never been able to do. It hadn't really been modeled to me, learning how to really like rest and nourish my body, going through these really intense ceremonies all the time, setting very clear boundaries, especially around my menstrual cycle and around my bleed time, because in the jungle where I lived, in the lineage of the Cofán people, menstrual blood is more spiritually powerful than the medicine of ayahuasca, the medicine of Yahe. And so when a woman is bleeding in their cosmology, she's in ceremony. She's in a ceremony that is just as, if not more powerful than an ayahuasca ceremony. And the more and more that I deepened into the medicine of my monthly blood, every single month when it would come, for at least the first 2 to 3 days, I would just be in my room alone, taking care of myself. No one bothered me. No one asked me to do anything. People were so caring and so supportive. And I was having like full psychedelic visions, like in the same capacity that I would have in an ayahuasca ceremony, and receiving deep information and intuition and understanding. And so the more that I deepened into the medicine of womanhood, the more that I started to understand that the medicine of manhood is really different, and that on a biological, physiologic level, there are just profound differences that I had never learned about. And I was able to see this within a ceremonial context in the way that men and women worked with ayahuasca as well. Like one of my teachers, my elder Abuelo Querubín, said, generally speaking, the amount of medicine that a man has to drink in order to do the same amount of spiritual work that a woman has to drink is like 3 cups to 1 cup. Like a man usually has to drink like 3, maybe 4 cups in a ceremony to be able to do the work that a woman can do in 1. Because her nervous system is so sensitive already. She's already so in tune and intuitive. She's already deeply interconnected to all of the other realms. Women are always in that. Men actually need more support with that. They need more medicine. And so hearing things like that in the jungle was always just fascinating to me, to recognize, okay, like on a spiritual level, when they're trying to go out into the other realms, like they need more yahe, they need more ayahuasca than I do. Why is that? And when I came back to the States, I was in this deep inquiry of just trying to figure out, okay, like what is going on here? And I was very fortunate to find some really incredible Western teachers who were speaking on specifically the biological differences of men and women, the biological differences in our brain structures, the biological differences in our hormonal matrices, the biological differences in like our bone density, in our muscle mass, and like just the way that our skeleton is created. Learning about everything with birth work. I'm like deep in a apprenticeship with the female pelvis, right? Because like that is where a baby is going to be coming through, and just seeing the difference of what a female pelvis looks like versus a male pelvis and what it is biologically designed to do. And so I think that I'm pretty far away from the like modern polarity teachings with like a spiritual soup world of like the masculine and the feminine, divine masculine. Like I really approach it from a biological place of just kind of like, this is what the female body is biologically designed to do. This is what the male body is biologically designed to do. And if you had told my younger self that I was writing about this, if you had told my younger self that I was speaking about womanhood like this, about manhood like this, about male and female dynamics, about, what is the biological and spiritual role of sex and attraction, all of that kind of stuff, I would have said that like, you're like a heteronormative piece of shit. And now I can actually really understand the biological coherence of those teachings. And it's because I've like literally learned about the brain. It's because I've learned about the skeleton. It's because I've learned about the body itself, not these ideas of like what we think is masculine, what we think is feminine, which are often just like very strange and off-putting distortions of the mess that we've gotten ourselves into right now with a lot of gender politics. Just coming back to our physiology is what has brought me into right alignment with like, this is how I, as a woman, want to engage with men, and not just men that I am in a relationship with, not just men I'm having sex with, not just men that I would have a family with, but this is how I want to engage with my father. This is how I want to engage with my male bosses and my male coworkers. This is how I want to engage with my male friends. This is how I want to engage with male family members. That's actually been the most important part, is decentering the romantic aspect of it, because I'm currently not in partnership. That was also a big part. Like I went through this horrendous breakup that destroyed me, and I was like, I don't know shit about men. I should learn about men. And it brought me into biology. So I think that is like the orientation and the framework that I operate from, is like, what is biologically coherent? It's not about morals. It's not about what's right or wrong. It's really just about being in alignment with biology.
And circling back to the womb and using hormonal birth control, we are altering our biology. Women en masse are altering our biology. And so, how can we have a real, true understanding of women and men, the feminine and the masculine, when we are so profoundly suppressing that, right? Talk a little bit more about that and about just societally the overall impact of what we're doing to ourselves by altering our cycles.
Yeah, with birth control. I'll start this with just a degree of sensitivity to honor and respect the pendulum swing that we've been in, to recognize that there has been a long period of time where there's been a lot of sexual violence, male violence, coercion, being forced into marriages because we didn't have any other financial means. That was a reality for a long time and for a vast majority of more modern human history. And that was the reality for a lot of women. And so then we had this big pendulum swing to the other side, where women understandably were like, I don't want to experience this degree of violence anymore, and this degree of coercion, and not having control and choice over my own life. And a huge part of that is like my capacity to reproduce. And how do I maintain agency and autonomy over my fertility and my decision to become a mother, which is a sacred, holy decision to make. And so where I think things really went awry is that traditionally, within all intact cultures, there are all of these wisdom keeping traditions around how to observe your natural fertility signals, how to track your menstrual cycle, how to track ovulation, and then also how to prevent an unplanned pregnancy with herbs and with plants. I have a long lineage of that with my European ancestry, but in the jungle, they have their own plants. In every territory, you will find plants that will support women in the reproductive cycle, either with painful periods and cramps, with the desire to not get pregnant, with the desire to have a peaceful pregnancy, plants for postpartum, plants for lactation. Like, we have a whole herbal apothecary available to us in any territory. Where things really got fucked up is that when we look at particularly the history of Europe, Indigenous Europe, during the period leading into the witch trials, all of the midwives were targeted during this time by the church. And the midwives were the female womb wisdom keepers. They were the people that kept their matrilineal traditions intact, not only the medicines that we worked with, but the songs and the stories and the prayers and the ceremonies. And all of those women were drowned, were burned, were hanged, were tortured, and we lost all of that wisdom. And so when you look at the birth rates in Europe during the time of the witch trials, after the great famines, the midwives were very hard at work helping families keep the amount of children smaller to just like 1 or 2 kids because there weren't enough resources. And so families were able to choose when they were going to bring in a child and when they weren't. After the witch trials, that birth rate exploded to like sometimes up to 10 children on average, many of which didn't actually make it into adulthood, right? And so we have this idea that like before hormonal birth control, women were just like having, 10, 14 babies all the time. But that's a very short stretch of human history that was all decimated during the witch trials. And then, of course, that was sent out throughout the rest of the world through colonization, through white supremacy, and the murder and the genocide of medicine women worldwide was just, rampant. And so I see where women got to at the point in kind of like the 40s, the 50s, the 60s, when hormonal contraceptives were first coming out, where they were like, well, we don't have any other resources. And so if this is going to give me choice and agency over my life, then I'm going to take that, right? But then, as you were speaking to, what women didn't understand at all, because many of the women were like guinea pigs, essentially, when these hormonal contraceptives were first being created, they were experimented on in Puerto Rico. They were experimented on throughout like the bodies of Black women, Indigenous women in the United States, Mexican women, poor white women, European immigrants, Asian immigrants, all of that. They were being experimented upon. And they had no idea what was happening with their hormones and with their body. They had no idea that their menstrual cycles were literally being shut down. They were shocked that when they first started taking hormonal contraceptives, they didn't get a bleed. And so then they were convinced that they were actually pregnant. And so the creators of the first hormonal contraceptives put in that week of the sugar pills, which prompts a hormonal withdrawal bleed, which tricked women into thinking that they were still getting an actual period. And so women had no idea that their menstrual cycles were completely shut off, that their hormonal levels were more similar to that of postmenopausal women, and that their vitality, that their intuitive body oracle was completely offline. And so then we had women who were taking birth control and wanting to do the responsible thing, wanting to have autonomy over their fertility, wanting to have choice around the decision to move into the sacred portal of motherhood. They were doing what they thought was best, as my mother did, as my grandmother did, as I did for a moment in time during those 4.5 years that I was on the pill and knew that I wasn't ready to become a mother. They were doing what they thought was the most responsible and mature and adult thing to possibly do. What they didn't realize was that that causes such a distortion and disorientation between the kind of man that you end up being attracted to, because your menstrual cycle and your hormonal matrix is going to impact your pheromone receptors. Your pheromone receptors are what tell you if this man is going to be genetically diverse enough to have a successful pregnancy and to have a healthy child. And so when you're on hormonal contraceptives, you're attracted to men who are actually more similar to you in their genetic makeup. And then when you get off of birth control, oftentimes you will lose physical attraction to that man if you met him on birth control. There's also a lot of women who will meet a man. They're not on birth control at all. They're not on hormonal contraceptives. They're super attracted to him. They go on the pill and they lose all of their libido, all of their attraction, the relationship falls apart, they go off the pill and they're attracted to him again. And so it's really modulating as well our relationships with our men. It's having a deep impact on the unions that are being called forth. It's really damaging our capacity to be able to trust our biology that says this man would be a good partner for me and a good father for my children. Whether you decide to have children or not, that's not the point. But that is what sexual attraction is, knowing that this man would make a good father. And so the way that I see birth control really weaving into all of this and hormonal contraceptives, and I haven't even talked about the IUDs and the damage that that has like energetically on your womb
Oh, I bet.
space, but that's kind of what I could say about that.
Wow. Oh my gosh, Claire, I learn so much from you every time you speak and every time you write. And these are all things that I feel like were deep inside of me that I knew. And I'm just remembering them through the words that you're speaking. And it's just so beautiful. And I'm so excited for your upcoming birth control series where you're going to dive even deeper into these things starting next week. And I really hope listeners will join us for that. I'm hoping to bring my daughter as well if I can convince her. If not, I will force her to listen to the recordings. But talk a little bit more about how you came up with the series and give a little preview of what people will experience.
Yeah, totally. So it's funny when I track it back, I essentially wrote the full manual for this class when I was living in the jungle when I was 26. So I guess a little bit over 3 years ago at this point. And I was in this process of healing my own womb and in like deep research and deep study for years at this point around hormonal health because I had such painful periods. I had such bad hormonal acne. I had so many chronic vaginal infections, and I was just trying to figure it out. And so when I was living in the jungle, I essentially wrote up this 100-page long womb care guide about a lot of different things, not just hormonal contraceptives and birth control. But essentially, when I came back to the States, one of the very first practitioner level trainings that I did was with one of my teachers, Kidis Dashe from the Holy Well. And it was called Sovereign Cycles. And it was all about plants for pregnancy prevention and then herbal abortion outside of the medical system. And it gave me this level of very clear understanding of like herbal protocols and how, most importantly, how to translate the information that I had already embodied and been practicing for years to support other women and to like give me the confidence to say, okay, I've been doing this myself for 4.5 years. And now I do feel like I have enough of the like education to really speak on it clearly and easily and openly. And so that was like one part of that. And essentially it was like a 9-month long process where right when I got to the end of 9 months, I was like, I really feel that I need to teach on this. And I hadn't been planning on teaching anything anytime soon, but it was a class that I had been thinking about where I was like, oh, that would be so chill and easy. It's a 3-part series. You talk about how to transition off of hormonal contraceptives and IUDs, how to begin tracking your fertility and your menstrual cycle, and then how to prevent pregnancy with plants. Like, I could do that in my sleep. I've been doing that for years. And then I was like, oh, okay, that means that I have to teach it now. If it's something that's so embodied and so normal and so natural for me, and I feel so comfortable talking about it, and I'm so excited about it, and I like nerd out about it, then this has to be something that needs to be birthed into the world. And the other part of it that I think I through the process of developing this class has been recognizing that I've been tapping into the collective womb consciousness that is saying like women are actually really, really hungry for this information. And for me, I was, in my earlier 20s looking at like weird websites called like sisterzeus.com, and it was very secretive and like underground, and it was really hard to find information like this. And the more and more that it comes out and that it's widely available, I feel that women are so hungry for it because they really do want to be back in alignment with their womb sovereignty, with their autonomy, with their choice, with their intuition, with their feminine vitality, with the medicine of womanhood. I do feel that call. And so when I first introduced the class, I started getting women reaching out to me and being like, oh, did I ever tell you about my birth control story? Oh, did I ever tell you about my time with the hormonal IUD? Oh, did I ever tell you about when I ended up in the hospital because of this? And I was like, no, I had no idea. And so then I invited the women onto my podcast to start sharing, which you came onto the podcast. Your episode is going to be coming out next week. Women just sharing their experience on birth control. And so while it is a class about natural pregnancy prevention, natural birth control, working with your menstrual cycle, able to notice your fertility window, working with plants to prevent an unplanned pregnancy, that's a part of it. But more than anything, I do really feel that this class is a coming together amongst women in community, in circle, in ceremony, the way that women have been doing since the beginning of time to pass these wisdom keeping traditions amongst ourselves, right? I think that we're definitely in a time where very few of us have elders who are able to pass all of this information on to us. And so we're kind of at this point where we're actually coming into circle with the women who are maybe around the same age as us, or maybe 10 years older than us, or 10 years younger than us. And we're figuring out how to do it together, which I also feel is a deep, deep call to reweave the fractured web of feminine wisdom keeping as well. It's a call to really look at a lot of deep sister wounds, a lot of deep mother wounds, a lot of deep pain amongst women, and to be able to be in space together and recognize, like, what is our common experience here? We've all had our fertility managed by something outside of us. We've all had our autonomy taken from us by some external force. And we all have the capacity to recognize that no one can take that from us ever. And so when we come together and we do this work together in this collective womb prayer, there's also a deep, intense kind of quantum level transformation occurring amongst women. Because when one woman starts being more at home and at peace in her body, other women will start being like, what's up with her? What changed? What's going on with you? And that woman can say, this is the work that I've been doing. Are you interested? And so in that way as well, it's all of these ripples throughout the collective. And so that's like the short-term and long-term vision of this project. The short-term is the class. It's going to be awesome. I'm super excited. The long-term is a much bigger calling to just come back into right alignment with the medicine of womanhood. It often starts with getting off of hormonal contraceptives, and then there's a long unraveling that occurs after that. And so this is like one little drop in the big ocean of womb wisdom.
So excited for it. And I think that part of what's happened to us too is we've been conditioned to fear these natural things in our body. And so what would you say to somebody who's like, I don't feel ready. Like I feel a little bit scared about going off of hormonal birth control.
Yeah, the first thing I would say is that fear is totally normal and understandable. And I would be shocked if you weren't scared. I would be shocked because we've been taught as women to fear our own bodies. We've been taught to fear our fertility. We've lived many, many lifetimes where we didn't have agency over that choice to call a soul forth. And so we're not only moving through a lot of the pain and fear in this lifetime, but we're also moving through the pain and fear of past lifetimes. And we're also moving through the pain and fear that is in the collective womb consciousness. And so the first thing I would say is honor that fear. That fear is important. And that fear is also strategic because it is also going to be the thing that orients you towards how you're going to relate to your sexuality and relate to the men who have access to your body. Because it forces you more and more to recognize, if I have sex, I could potentially create the life of a child with someone. And is that the man that I would want to be the father? That's the first thing. I think that fear is strategic because it teaches us how to sharpen our discernment with the men who have access to our fertility. That's the first thing. The second thing that I would say about that is there's no rush. You don't have to get off of birth control tomorrow. You can take this class and decide in 3 months or in 6 months or in a year that you finally feel ready. You could take this class and decide that you're going to quit the pills cold turkey and you're going to flush them down the toilet and you're going to make it happen. I personally wouldn't recommend that, actually. I would recommend giving yourself a month to 3 months, depending on how long you have been on hormonal contraceptives, to prepare and repair your organ systems, your liver, your kidney, your reproductive system, your endocrine system, your digestive system, all of that with herbs, with food, with a little bit of supplementation. I'm not a big supplement girly, but I do think that there are times when it can be really useful, and transitioning off of hormonal contraceptives is one of them. So take the time that you need to do the physical repair, and then also take the time to do the deep spiritual preparation. Figure out how you're going to start tracking your cycle. Slowly start implementing that so that you're already in the habit of doing those things every day and it feels normal and easeful. And then gently end the hormonal contraceptives. Get the IUD removed, go off of the pills. Take the time that you need. There's no urgency around any of this. Your body is intelligent. Your body can repair itself. Your spirit can come back into alignment. There is no need to like shock the system with it. And then the last thing that I would say about it is that as someone who's been practicing this form of pregnancy prevention, natural birth control for 4.5 years, I can say that I interact with not just like sexuality, but my erotic life force energy, my creativity, my vitality, my inner, feminine wisdom with so much joy and trust and peace because I do feel resourced. I have a relationship with these plants already. I know which ones that I would need to call on if I had an unplanned potential pregnancy occurring. I know what the golden window of opportunity is between ovulation and menstruation, where I call in herbs to prevent implantation of a fertilized egg. I know the herbs that I can work with to soften my cervix and open my body to bleed. I know which herbs I can call on as a menagogues that will promote menstruation. Like I feel so resourced by my plant cestors, my herbal allies. I feel so resourced by the land, by the earth, and by my own wise womb ancestors who always knew how to work in this way in relationship with my female hormonal matrix and my female physiology, my female biology, not working against it and forcing it into unnatural expressions of contraception, but in really fluid and easeful and natural ways that feel good in my body. So that's kind of what I would say about the fear, is that on the other side of fear is liberation.
Exactly. Claire, thank you so much. I am so excited for your class. And I'll just say too that I feel there's going to be something for everyone in this class. I can already imagine the aha moments that I'm going to have, even though I am reaching the time in my life where I'm no longer fertile. Just, I think we all can benefit from your knowledge about repairing the damage that's been done too over manipulating our cycles in this way. And so I really encourage everyone to attend. And I'm super excited for you and excited to see what you do next, because I really see this grand vision that you have, and that this is just, like you said, the first little drop in what will be the ocean. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Sarah. And, just to close up what you just said, like I've had women who have been like, well, I've been off of birth control for a long time. Like, is this going to be helpful? And what I would say about that is the lack of education that we have around all of this. Receiving the information retroactively heals that timeline of misinformation and miseducation as well. It heals all of the soul fracturing that occurred. And so even if you're someone who's like your age, in your mid 40s, moving more into perimenopause, into menopause, how you interacted with your body while you were on birth control is going to have an impact on that transition as well. And so it is this like act of really time traveling and time weaving and being able to retroactively recognize all the ways in which maybe you weren't in your body and all of the ways that you can continue to come back to your body now, which is always beneficial no matter what. Yeah, I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, and any work that we do in this direction helps heal the collective little by little too. So thank you so much. And I look forward to talking to you within the class.
Awesome. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you for tuning in to Goddess in Training. I hope something in this episode stirred your knowing or softened your heart. If it spoke to you, share it with someone who needs it, or leave a review or comment to help others find us. If you're watching on YouTube, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. If you want to hear more conversations like this, please consider supporting Goddess in Training on Patreon. For more tools and offerings to deepen your intuition practice, visit goddessintraining.online. You can also join the Scroll of Seshat on Substack for twice-weekly stories of how I followed my intuition. The music for Goddess in Training is Madre Ayahuasca by Arkawa, and you can find more of his music in the link to his website in the show notes. Remember, your intuition is not a mystery, it's a memory. Keep listening.
Resplandor del fuego, estrellita, tabaco santo, fuerza de rapel, soplo de luz, soplo encantado, viajecito, bendición del cielo, fortaleza, tigrecito de